Hello everyone, myself Dr. Jyoti Mandala. Welcome you all to the video lecture series on object-oriented programming through Java. So up to our last video, we learned about what actually a method is and how a method can be written. All these things we learned with a simple example. We also learned about how to write a simple Java program and how to compile it and how to execute the Java program also we learned in our previous videos, and we have learned some concepts like arrays and strings. So for your reference, I have created a complete playlist of this Java programming, so which you can get from the below bottom bar. Okay, so go through that link and you can learn all the concepts from the Java programming language. So let us proceed with our today's concept, that is about constructors. Now what is a constructor? This is a new concept. So where this type of constructor is not there in the earlier programming language, whatever you have learned like C programming language. So let us see what actually the use of this constructor is. Normally we have created an object till now. So whenever we are creating an object, first we need to write down a class, and for that class a copy will be created so that all the methods can be called by using that object. Right now, unknowingly we have used the constructor concept as of now. How we have used it is, normally the constructor will be used to initialize the object when it is created. So we have created the object by using new operator, and we have done we have written that statement in our program, but unknowingly it is calling a default constructor. We have not even if you have not written any statement as part of constructor, but at the time of object creation only the constructors will be called. Now what is the use of this constructor is, normally the constructor will be used to initialize the object. What do you mean by initialization is nothing but we have some instance variables in our class. You all know what do you mean by instance variables. Now to initialize those instance variables to some values, then that can be automatically done at the time of object creation. But if you don't have this constructor option, then what we will be doing is object dot that instance variable will be writing, and then we are assigning the values. But at the time of object creation itself, if you want to initialize the values of those instance variables, that can be done easily by using your constructor. Right? So we can use constructor to give the initial values to the instance variables defined within the class. So it is nothing but a startup procedure. Now it has the same name as the class name. So whenever you want to write any constructor, I'll show you the syntax and all, but whenever you are giving any name to the constructor, its name should be equal to your class name. Whatever name you are giving for the class name, same name should be given to your constructor also. Remember, constructors are mainly used to initialize your instance variables at the time of your object creation only. So how that will be done, I'll show you. Okay, the syntax and everything of this constructor is similar to your method, which we learned about methods in our previous video. So the syntactically it is similar to the constructor, similar to the method, but what are the main differences between them we'll learn in the end of this lecture. Okay, so when the constructor will be called, the constructor will be called at the time of object creation. That means at the time of allocating memory for that object. So every time an object is created using a new operator, at least one constructor is called. Till now we have not written any constructor in our previous examples, right? But even if you have not written any constructor, by default a default constructor will be created by the compiler. Now what the compiler will do is it will create its own constructor with the name of your class name, and all the instance variables will be initialized to 0. By default it will be done by the compiler if you have not written any constructor. So till now we have not written any constructor, so the compiler has generated its own constructor with our class name, and all the instance variables are initialized to 0. But if you write your own constructor, then the default constructor will no longer used. It will be using our written constructors only. Right? So with this basic knowledge, let us proceed further how a constructor can be written and how the flow of execution will be done. right? So whenever you are creating any constructor, you need to follow some rules. The first rule is the name of the constructor should be equal to your class name. So whatever class name you are using, same name should be used for your constructor. And a constructor should not have a return type, even though I told you like exactly the syntax and all is similar like your methods, but the constructor will not be having any return type. Some dissimilarity is there between the method and the constructor, that I'll highlight. Okay, so there should not be any return type for the constructor. And Java constructor cannot be your abstract constructor or static, final, synchronizer. These keywords should not be used in connection with your constructors, right? So keep these rules in your mind, and then we can start proceeding with our constructor. But whenever we want to work with the constructors, we have two types of constructors: no argument constructors and parameterizer constructor. So these can be called as unparameterizer constructors, and this can be called as parameterizer constructor. Same like your methods, we have no arguments or no unparameterizer methods and parameterizer methods. Same here also, constructors can be argumented constructors or no argumented constructors. So let us learn in detail about these two types. First type is, so whenever you want to use constructor, observe here the syntax is given in the class itself. Your class name, whatever you are using, that name you need to use, and you need to put the parenthesis. There should not be any return type. That is what I told you. That is what mentioned here as the second rule. There should not be any return type, and whatever class name you are giving here, same class name should be given, and you need to use parenthesis here. If no arguments are there, then no arguments here will be there. If you are going with the second type, we will be having the parameters. We learn in detail. Now what are all the initialization you want to do, that can be done here. Now how it will be called, when it will be called, that we'll learn in future slides. Okay. So the first type of your constructor is a no argument constructor. No argument constructor is nothing but it will not accept any parameters in its parenthesis, whatever we are defining in the constructor. So with this no argument constructor, your instance variables will be initialized to some fixed values for all the objects. So for all the objects, suppose for your class you are creating two objects, object 1 and object 2. For both the objects, the instance variable value will be given as the same fixed value. We don't have an option of giving different values. I'll show you with an example. So this is the syntax what we need to follow. You need to give your class name, and within the class you need to use the same class name, give empty parenthesis list, and then you write down your instance variable, whatever variable you want to initialize, and initialize some value. So how many copies you create with this class, that means how many objects you create with this class name. For all the objects, the variable name value will be fixed. So let me show you one example. Let us consider one class called my class, and in my class I am taking one instance variable num. Okay, and my class is one constructor. Observe the difference between the method and the constructor. Method will be having the return type, and then any name can be given for the method, but for constructor no return type, and name should be your class name only. Okay, and here you can see I have not given any parameters, no arguments are there, and this num variable has been initialized to 10 here. Right now, whenever you have created one class like this and have created another class example, in this example I have taken main method, and in the main method I am creating an object of this class. So whenever I am writing O1 object, whenever I am creating like this, you can see like this we have earlier also written. So at that time we have not written any class, any constructor like this. But if you are writing your own constructor, then whenever you are writing my class, this statement, whenever you are creating any object, then this will by default call this constructor, and for O1 the num value will be equal to 10. Right, and again whenever you are creating another object O2, and for O2 also my class we are calling unparameterized constructor. That means this will be automatically called at the time of object creation, and for this also num value will be 10. So whenever you write system.out.println O1.num and O1.2, if you write O2.num, if you write like this, then you will be getting an output for both the objects, the value will be 10. That is what it is told. Instance variable of a method will be initialized with the fixed values for all the objects. The value is 10, which is fixed for all the objects. So that is what we are doing here. Let me run this program. Let us check one example with this. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are creating one class called ex, and in the ex I am trying to create one instance variable. Let us call that instance variable is I. Okay, now always class name should be equal to constructor name should be equal to your class name. And what is the use of the constructor? Constructors are used to initialize your instance variable. What is our instance variable? Our instance variable is I equal to 10. Okay, and I am closing this one, and I am closing my class. Now I am creating another class. Okay, ex13, and in this I am writing my main method. Okay, now in the main method, what my option here is, I want to create an object of this class. Why? Because I want to call this constructor. So this constructor will be called at the time of object creation only. So class name and object name, let us call O1 equal to O1, which is equal to new ex. Okay, so new ex, and we need to write like this, empty parenthesis. What do you mean by this one? Whenever you write like this, unparameterized constructor ex will be called, and for O1 I value will be 10. Okay, and then again the same statement can be I can copy, and I want to create another object. Let us call that object is 2. Now I want to print the values. So how can we print the values? You all know how can you print the values? So I want to print I value of S1, just for our understanding I am writing. So how can we print that one? Plus S1 dot O1. Okay, and then I am copying the same value, I value of, not S1, what is this? I value of O1, isn't it or not? So how can we write O1 dot, this is so how can we call O1 dot, what is the variable name? I. Okay, so let us copy this, because I want to print the value for the other object also, I value for O2, and how can we print O2 dot I2, right? So this is the end of your main method, and this is the end of your class. Now we need to save this program. Our program name should be the class name which is having the main method. So let us save this. So where we can save, wherever you want you can save that. So .java, and then save. Okay, so it is saved. So let us move to our command prompt. Where is our command prompt? So this is our command prompt. You need to move to the path where your program is saved. Now let us compile our program. Java C. What is our program? ex13. It is ex13.java. Okay. If any error is there, that will be displayed. If no error is there, we can directly execute now ex13. Okay, so you can check I value for O1 is 10, I value for O2 is 10. So for both the objects O1 and O2, the I value is fixed. That is what the use of your constructor. So you can see here we are not explicitly, that means we are not using object name dot ex, like whenever you want to call methods we need to follow that approach, but this constructor will be called automatically at the time of your object creation only. So whenever you write this statement, after writing this statement the compiler will execute this one, and the I value for this O1 will be initialized. Understood all of you? So this is how this can be worked. So this is how no arguments constructor will be working. You have the second option. What is the second option? Is parameterized constructor. Now what is the use of this parameterized constructor is, if you want to initialize different values, here you can see in the output screen O1 and O2, both the objects will be having the same value. But if you want to have O1 with 10 value and O2 with 20 value, then you can go with the parameterized constructor, where it will help us to provide different values, that means different values for different objects. Okay, and you can also provide the same value. That can also be done using this approach, but you have an additional option like providing different values also. So it can accept one or more parameters. So whenever you are saying parameterized constructor, at least one parameter should be there in your as part of your arguments list. Okay, so the parameters are added to the constructor the same way you have done with the methods. So you can see the syntax here. Class name and the constructor name should be equal, and you need to provide your parameters here, and whatever parameters you are using here, that should be assigned to your variable list. You can see your example. I have taken the variable called x, and for this x, whatever parameter I am passing here, that will be initialized. You can check here for object 1, as I am mentioning one parameter, so I am passing one value 10, and that 10 will be copied into the I, and x value will be that I for your object 1. And for object 20, 20 will be copied into I, and that I value will be assigned to x. That means for object to 20 value x, for object to x value will be 20. So if you run this program, you will be getting an output of 10, 20 for your program. So let us modify our program, whatever program we have done here. So what is our program we have done? Earlier we have given the same value, but now I want to use the parameterized constructor. Observe here, we are not writing any parameter in the earlier case. Now I want to pass one parameter. Let us consider the first parameter is 10. If you are passing any parameter, then here it should be a parameter. Let us call that parameter is a. Okay, now then what we can do, initializing, instead of initializing the value as it is, I am assigning whatever a value I am getting, that value I am assigning to my instance variable. Okay, now here 20 I can pass. Okay, now what happens for the first time whenever you are creating any object for O1, then for O1 a value will be 10, then I value also will be 10 for your O1. And for O2, a value is 20, so I value will be 20. So for O1 and O2, we are getting two different values. Let us compile and check whether we are getting the output or not. Save this program, compile your program, and then run your program. You can check here, I value of O1 is 10 and I value of O2 is 20, because we are passing two different parameters. Got it all of you? So this is how parameterized constructors can be used. If you want, you can initialize two, you can pass two parameters also. Let us check that one. Okay, if you can pass two parameters also. Let me write two parameters. If you want to initialize I and j, then you can simply do that one. Okay, j equal to t. Very simple. So similarly, you can pass two parameters here also. So at least one parameter should be passed if you are talking with a parameterized constructor, right? So this is how parameterized constructors can be used, and the output for this program will be 10 and 20. Got it? Now let us see what is the difference between the constructors and the parameters. I hope you all are clear with this unparameterized, that means no arguments constructor and the parameterized constructor. Okay, I hope you all are clear. So let us highlight the differences between the constructors and the method. The first difference is whenever you want to call any method, the normal approach we used to call, whenever you want to call any method, you need to create one object. Let us call that object is O1, and then using object and then dot operator, we will be calling, like you will be calling like this, O1 dot method name. Let us call that method name is add. You need to write like this, isn't it or not? We used to call a method like this. But whenever you are calling a constructor, the constructors will be called automatically at the time of object creation. So no need to call them forcibly, isn't it or not? And what is the first one is, normally the constructor is used to initialize your instance variables, but whereas method is used to define any behavior of the object, like what you want to do with that method, those statements you need to write into your method, but whereas constructor is used to initialize your instance variable. Okay, and the second difference is constructor is not having any written type, but whereas method must have a written type. If you don't want to return any value, at least you need to give void in case of methods, but in case of constructors, no written type is there. That is your second difference. And the third difference is, this is what I told you, methods should be invoked explicitly by using your object name and dot operator, but constructors are invoked implicitly at the time of object creation, right? Now next one is in case of the compiler will provide a default constructor if you are not mentioning any constructor. That means if you are not writing any constructor in your program, the compiler will create its default constructor and all the instance variables will be initialized to the 0, and that will be done by the compiler. But in case of method, no default method will be created by the compiler. If you want, you have to do. But in case of constructor, a default constructor will be created if it is not there. right? And the last one is method name can be any name. Any name can be given, but whereas coming to the constructor name should be equal to, must be equal to your class name. So these are all the some 5 highlighted differences between your constructor and the method. You need to understand these differences. Okay, with this we can come to an end of our today's class, where we learned about in detail about the constructors, and we also learned about what actually the use of the constructor. We learned about 2 types of constructor, parameterized constructor and no arguments constructor, and we have observed some examples also, and also we have observed the differences between the constructor and the method. I hope you all are clear with this concept. Let us all meet in our next lecture. Until then, thank you all of you.